Well, good morning. Thank you all for joining us today for the conversation with the President on Energy and Economic Impact. My name is Jennifer Battle. I'm the Director of Campus Sustainability and your MC for today. I do want to mention that this is part of the MSU Science Festival, and this is a first ever Science Festival, and it allows for a lot of discussions and hands-on activities and tours around the campus. It's free and open to the public, so I encourage you to check out other activities throughout the Science Festival at sciencefestival.msu.edu. So the format is such that we're going to have each panelist speak for a couple of minutes, and then there will be a Q&A session afterwards. People can submit questions via Twitter using the hashtag MSU Energy. If you are here in the live audience, you should have some note cards and pencils with you. So if you have questions that you'd like to submit, Karen Zelt, wave your hand. Karen Zelt will be taking questions and submitting them to me, and we'll submit them for our panelists. Any questions that we don't get to today, we will answer on the website energytransition.msu.edu. And again, this event is being streamed live, and it will be recorded and available afterwards as well on that same website. So first, let me just say this. We're talking about the energy transition plan that was adopted by the MSU Board of Trustees last year. It's a long-range energy plan for the university that has three main goals: to improve the physical environment, invest in sustainable energy research and development, and also to become an educational leader in sustainability. We update the plan every 5 years from extensive experts from the community and from the campus, and the energy transition plan information is also available on the Energy Transition Plan website. So without further ado, because you guys aren't here to see me speak, I'd like to introduce our three panelists today. The first you will certainly recognize as President Luana Simon. President Simon leads the university's work to advance the common good in Michigan and around the world. As president, Simon has engaged MSU in a strategic and transformative journey to adapt the principles of the land-grant tradition to the 21st century challenges. She's expanded MSU's reach in the state and around the world by focusing the energy strengths on solutions that enhance and protect the quality of life, clean and affordable energy, access to education, safe and plentiful food, and health care. Research at Michigan State University reflects Simon's commitment to advancing knowledge and discovery to improve quality of life. Under her leadership, MSU has expanded research in biofuels and green energy, safe water, and agriculture. With the support of external funding, Simon is helping ensure that MSU is making a significant positive difference locally and globally. Next, we have Brandon Marken. He is the VP of Commercial Sales at EverLast Lighting. He's cultivated a nationwide network of manufacturers, representatives, and distributors, increasing consumer awareness of EverLast products and leading EverLast to record sales. Marken travels throughout the U.S. addressing and educating many groups of people on the benefits of induction lighting technology. Marken was promoted to Vice President of Commercial Sales in 2012. Brandon has continued to oversee the commercial sales and department as well as take on additional responsibilities. He's played an integral part in the company's growth and is instrumental in developing the EverLast brand, as well as the development of products, fixture benchmarking, and energy audits. Then finally, on my far left, there's Bruce Thompson. He's the VP of Corporate Development for Rockford Construction. Thompson has worked in corporate development roles for more than 20 years with a focus on market development for a range of emerging technologies, including clean technology. Thompson was involved in early efforts to commercialize internet services, launching the first large-scale e-commerce service. He joined Proxicom, where he was responsible for launching software product groups and international corporate development. He also worked with the U.S. Green Building Council and a leading real estate development firm to explore green building initiatives. In 2009, Thompson helped launch Rockford Berger and is a partner in the new venture with Rockford Construction, Berger Group, and Napa Group. He serves as an adjunct professor at Aquinas College in their Sustainable Business Program, is an advisor to Energetics Composite, and serves as an advisor to AtSite, a building performance management company, and assists the company with market development and investor relations. A mouthful, lots of accomplishments for our three panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce President Simon to start her remarks.
Well, I will make sure that we catch up on the time frame so you can ask your questions. And this would make two or three sort of framing questions and a little bit of a nuance on Jennifer's comments. The way I envision the energy transition plan, along with all the other plans that we have at Michigan State, is it first is a transparent document to the community that sets, in many ways, very aggressive goals for the university in the sustainability area. And if you look at the goals that are in the plan compared to other goals, they are very aggressive. The second piece of that is to make annually our progress transparent to the community. Because we know in this area that there will be a variety of developments that are unpredictable at the moment, both in terms of their cost structure as well as simply the new technologies. And if you look at the list of goals for the sustainability plan, the energy transition plan, it was also to make us a laboratory for invention and the application of those inventions. So part of the dynamic is to make that, again, those benchmarks very transparent so that we can assess the dynamic. The third part of that is the importance of the operations committee, because all of this stuff is nice and many plans have these components, but don't have a group that sort of worries about how this happens on the ground on a regular basis. This is a place where if we're off target with our objectives, one way or the other, either the technology is not developed in a way that we planned, or there are new, or that things that have come up that would push the plan to be more aggressive because of advancements in technology, cost constraints, those kinds of things, then this operations committee has the opportunity to propose adjustments to that plan. So you have to see it as a living document, and one that will then, by board action, because Trustee Byram is here, have to go back to the board in 5 years. But it doesn't mean it doesn't change for 5 years, because most of the work that will happen under this plan will be towards how fast we can reach those objectives. And then if we reach those objectives, what can we do then to set different targets? And I think that's an important component of why we're doing it this way. And the final thing I would say is that the plan, when adopted, was not done unanimously, which is typical of these plans. And there's always going to be a tension as you look at these important issues among things about the technology and how it advances, how I would like philosophically, ideologically, to make the world a different place in a social justice, environmental justice context, and also then the reality of trying to make this happen in a real life context. Because this is not something that will be done theoretically. This is real. And we want to be the demonstration project for how you can really do this in a way that balances the sort of the social, the human behavior, the environmental, and the economic issues that have to be balanced in order to make a sustainability plan a reality, not simply at Michigan State, but across the country, across the world, in ways that will in fact make the planet a better place. And those tensions exist, they will always exist. And so we need then to be able to understand where those are and recognize that that's just part of the challenge we've taken on for ourselves. So there are lots of accomplishments that are on the website. So let me just pause there, turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Simon. First of all, I just want to say thanks to Michigan State for putting this on. Thanks. It's an honor to share the panel with President Simon and the colleagues. We appreciate, as manufacturers in the energy industry, being able to have these critical conversations. We think that they're vitally important. I've actually had the privilege to review numerous plans from different universities. We've worked closely with other universities in the development and implementation of these types of plans. And so first, I would just like to offer up that I appreciate what Michigan State University is doing. I think the plan is viable. I think it's a lot of these types of university plans are grandiose and they're undefined, and quite frankly, they're not attainable, and they don't have the measurables and the transparency. And the biggest thing that I appreciate about the plan, from what I read, is that it's holistic It leverages what Michigan State University is already good at in terms of agriculture and different industries. And I think the key is it's non-discriminatory. Oftentimes, the mistakes I see in these types of plans, recently there was a plan before the state of Michigan that made this same mistake, and it was that it limits technology. President Simon said it exactly right. We don't know what will be available 5 years from today. So why would we make a plan that doesn't accommodate development and these different types of things? And so that's a huge benefit from what I've seen from the plan that Michigan State has. So I have to congratulate you guys on a well-done proposal. I think it's measurable and deliverable. So get that out of the way. All right. The next thing I want to say is the reason I think that what Michigan State University is doing is so beneficial is because our universities fill really two vital components in the standpoint of industry and commercialization. And the biggest thing, obviously, is research. They develop the research, and they're willing to be incubators for technology so that manufacturers can leverage the minds and the human capital that we have at these universities. And Michigan State's certainly leading the way in doing that. The second real benefit, and this one's a little bit less tangible but equally important, is that they close the gap in terms of bringing technology to market. Oftentimes, the most difficult part of this process as a manufacturer of new and innovative energy technologies is that in the marketplace, in the commercial world, nobody wants to be the first. Nobody wants to try things out. I sit down with large buyers at Fortune 100 companies all the time, and they tell me repeatedly, well, we'll buy the second generation, or we'll try this when it's been proven across industry. And so universities fill that gap. It's not that we're taking huge risk or that we're being experimental, but they're saying we're going to collaboratively develop technology with manufacturers and with industry, and we're going to say, you know what, let's put this technology to use, and oftentimes be the first customer. And not in the sense that we're going to be reckless or not fiscally responsible, but we're going to say, we're going to measure this, we're going to see if it fits the bill as an effective, responsible technology, and if it's going to improve things. We work closely with the California Lighting Technology Center out at UC Davis. They have a very aggressive plan that's actually being modeled across the country. Michigan State has acted as a leader in this regard as well, and we've seen this model be very successful, and that's why we're so excited as a Michigan company to partner with a Michigan university. At UC Davis, we collaboratively developed some innovative smart controlled lighting. It was developed in their laboratories at their lighting center. We worked with them, created licensing agreements as a manufacturing company, brought it to market. They were able to be our first customer, install it around their campus, meter it, spend 2 years in the evaluation process, determine it's successful, and then we were able to take that and roll it out nationally. And now we've had a huge commercialization of that product. It's even being implemented now in California as code for the entire state to use some of these smart lighting technologies. And so that's a perfect model of a successful transition of research, first customer, and then commercialization. And that's what we really want to see. So I congratulate MSU for doing that. I'll let my closing comments be, if I could speak into the plan and say what I think that we really want to focus on, and I think the plan accommodates this, but in our industry we say reduce before you produce, because what we know, the data shows us that energy reduction, energy efficiency is significantly cheaper than energy production. So while solar and wind and geothermal and these technologies are emerging and promising, and it's integral for the universities to develop those technologies, in terms of fiscal responsibility, energy efficiency is typically half the cost of energy generation, even coal energy generation. But then when you start talking about things like wind and solar, it's 2 and 3 times more expensive to produce. And so we want to look at ways we can reduce first. And so lighting, which is what we do, is a great way to do that. HVAC, and your plan accommodates these things. And so I would just encourage, and from what I read, you guys are well aware of the diminishing returns that exist in these types of proposals. Do the easy stuff first. If you can cut your consumption by 50 to 60%, it's a lot easier to hit your goals of alternative energy, 10, 25 from alternative energy, eventually 50 and higher. So reduce first. Make your campus as efficient as possible. Be as cost effective as you can with these changes. And then come in and use these new technologies to create alternative energy options. I'll end with this just because they wanted to touch on this, and I think it's outstanding. Michigan State is putting their money where their mouth is. We've installed almost 800 induction smart lights across the campus at Michigan State. They've installed numerous lighting technologies, so they're not specific to induction or to EverLast. They've demoed a lot of different exciting stuff. The showcase installation is we did the parking garage at the Wharton Center with some smart lighting technology. We've estimated, just from what we've done thus far, that we've probably reduced the annual energy cost about $40,000 for Michigan State, just with several hundred light fixtures. And there's a great ROI and a rate of return on that. So this is an innovative technology that's commercialized and showing immediate returns for the university. So these are some of the exciting projects that have gone on so far. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. And Jennifer, again, thanks for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. And as Brandon said as well, I will keep my comments short so we can get into the questions. But I do want to say a couple of things about, as a construction firm, how do we view energy and sustainability? Because I think it's important. And it is a challenge, again, as Brandon said. The plan here, I think, is a very good one. But it took many years, I think, for all of us to really get into this position where we are, and our dependency on fossil fuels and the impact that they're having. So it will take many years to get out. And so we have a very long-term perspective of it as a construction company. But first, let me just say a little bit about, why do we think it's important as a construction company? I think it's key to really understand the impact that buildings have on the environment. A lot of times that's not well understood. And so a couple statistics. Buildings today contribute almost 40% of CO2 emissions. Commercial buildings account for 39% of all energy used in the U.S., 72% of all electricity. And then from a building owner perspective, energy is roughly 30% of operating costs. So those are some huge issues that we all need to think about and really sets the foundation for the work that's got to occur. The second side of that is we view it as a market opportunity. The market is pushing us as a construction firm and a development firm to really do a better job. And when I say that, you really need to look at what's happening out in the marketplace. We don't build for Walmart, but I'll use them as an example. They made an announcement this week. By the year 2020, they want to be 100% renewable energy, or base their energy on renewable energy sources. They're projecting $1 billion in savings if they do that. So clearly, and I think they stated that they were going to do 200 stores to have energy produced by solar power. So that's a significant force in the market. So firms like ours have to take note of that and say, okay, how do we bring the partnerships together to make that happen? It's not realistic in all geography, but it is critical, and there's a huge market opportunity. The second part, though, I'd like to stress is there are huge barriers that we face. One of the most significant is trying to educate building owners during the design, construction, and operation phase of a building about life cycle versus first costs. If we're just looking at things from a first cost basis, it is a huge challenge to overcome. Operating or life cycle costs are 3 to 1 on average of construction costs. So a lot of times it comes down to not only education but financing. How do you put something in place that might have a payback 5 years down the road versus 18 months, where a lot of people are looking for those paybacks. So we need to really, again, do a good job educating. We need to do a good job partnering with universities, as Brandon said, and others in the industry to try to help make those life cycle costs more realistic. The other part, in terms of a challenge, is trying to bring innovation into the marketplace. And if you look at what's been done in the last 5 or 10 years, it's amazing an amount of real things that you can bring into a building, for example, to help reduce energy use, to bring distributed energy into a building. The challenge, however, is if I'm a building owner and I'm looking at a building that might have a 40 or 50 year lifespan, I have to live with things for a long time. So again, as Brandon said, we need the university partnerships to try to prove things out quickly so that I can get them into a building, it can be practical, and I can get it financed. And that really is the last challenge in the commercial marketplace. How do you get a building financed based on things that have a longer payback, the technology that might be newer to the marketplace? So those are some of the barriers, but we do see it as an opportunity. And I'll just end by saying we take a very pragmatic approach, realizing that there's no silver bullet. There's no one renewable energy source out there that's going to solve our problems overnight. As I said earlier, it took us 100 years to get here. It's going to take us hopefully not 100 years to solve it, but it is a journey, and we just have to jump in and do the best we can along the way. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, great. That works. So now we're going to begin the question and answer phase of the program. And again, there you can submit questions. If you're viewing online, you can submit via Twitter using the hashtag MSUEnergy. We've already gotten a flurry of questions there. And for those who are in the audience, again, submit questions via note card. First question I have is, why doesn't MSU have a plan to retrofit its buildings when it could save millions? So, President Simon, we could talk about that, or we also have Linda Boomer, who's our energy and environmental
I think we
engineer
have a
in the
plan.
audience. we do.
We just don't have the money to do it all right now. Linda Boomer is here. There is a plan about how we should retrofit buildings. We are part of the Better Building Challenge, so we're going to take on one of the older science buildings as a part of that project, both as a demonstration project as well as something that can make a significant difference for the campus. So.
Right, and we have a 5-year plan for the campus general fund and a 10-year plan for the housing facilities, because they are going through a major retrofit in their buildings as well, and Jason Valance is leading that effort. So we're getting to them as quickly as funding allows.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have is, will MSU divest, sorry, and I'm having a hard time reading, will divest in fossil fuel corporations and jumpstart objectives by investing money in campus renewable energy projects?
Well, there are two parts of that question. There's obviously a 350 org fossil fuel, a national movement to encourage universities to divest their cash and long-term investments in certain types of companies. Our general policy tries to balance social and financial responsibilities. That question has been raised. It's one that we'll review with the Investment Advisory Council. I think right now about 0.5% of the cash and investments are direct holdings in the 200 companies that have been identified by 350 org fossil fuel. About less than 7.5 of the overall cash and investments are with oil, gas, or other energy corporations. So that's part one, and that's something that the Investment Advisory Council, I've committed group, will look at in terms of trying to do this in a responsible way. I would note that part of the investments that come off of our long-term investment holdings actually go to infrastructure improvements. And so there's an interesting balance in this question about how one generates the right returns so that we can have the money necessary to do just-in-time and other infrastructure changes. So we're going to try to look at that question and balance it. On the issue of investments, again, we use part of our not only general fund, but the investment returns to try to find ways to invest in new energy projects. But the major way universities do this is by our faculty getting grant and contract activity in order to explore new technologies.
I have a question for Bruce. What are some of barriers to achieving bankability, and how are they overcome for first of kind technologies?
First, I'll say there are certain institutions that really do understand clean technology and clean energy technology, I should say. So I think that's really the first place to start. The second we found is finding examples out there of projects that have been financed is really critical, because again, it's an educational process. So if you can point to things that have already been done, that always helps. And then third is, as I referenced earlier, finding, again, I guess it relates to examples, but very, very specific results from projects. For example, we're working on some wind projects, and it's really critical to show the financing entities that the technology does exist. It's been out there and it has been used. But as I said earlier, it is a challenge for things that have just come into the marketplace 5 to 10 years, in the last 5 to 10 years, because of that cycle.
Okay, I'm sorry. Another question we received under the premise reduce before you produce. What are we or can we do to incentivize behavior change that leverages reduction at the college, department, and personal level? So actually, let me take that one. I'm the moderator, but I can answer this. So one of the things
I was wondering whether I should turn over to you formally or informally.
I saw the side eye. So no, one of the things that we did talk about as an energy transition steering committee and as part of the plan is to provide some sort of incentive or ways to make it better for people to reduce at these levels. So what we've been charged with is coming up with an energy reduction incentive pilot program, which we're developing right now. And what we were looking at are ways to share savings with the departments and the units. And that's one of the things that we've heard from faculty and staff, is that there's no direct understanding right now of how much energy people are saving in their buildings, because only certain departments are billed directly. And so we wanted to figure out a way to build that in and do it with a carrot versus a stick, so in sharing savings. So we're working on that pilot program now.
One of the challenges that's a practical challenge for a place like this is the cost of metering is enormous. And it's not clear if you just do the back of the envelope. Everybody wants incentives, so I understand this behavioral issue. But once you put in the cost of metering and figure out the payback and then try to give back, the numbers don't work very well. So the question is, how do you develop a culture where it's everyone's responsibility to see themselves as contributing to this effort? Now, I think we do need to do some incentives, and you can do that for people who are essentially all in the same building. But you have to figure that out, and so you can do that a bit in laboratory buildings with indirect cost recovery. I mean, there are some vehicles, but the idea that simply metering and returning turns out to be a really great incentive. It's hard for me to have incentives that we're spending more money to do than we're getting a benefit from. And I'm sort of hard-nosed on that, but it's one of the sort of things that we're going to have to sort of work through in these pilots.
Okay. We have another general question, and this could be for our two business folks over here, is many companies feel that energy initiatives, particularly renewable energy, is a big expense. Why do you feel that renewable energy or energy efficiencies is beneficial to the economy?
Okay.
You go to the efficiency part, right?
Yeah.
That's you.
I think that one of the things we have to understand is that this is not something that universities need to feel, or anyone needs to feel like they're embarking on something that's not being done already. There's a lot of creative companies out there assuming the cost of capital and doing these projects, and they're backing it based on risk-related measurements tied to the technology. Chevron, Johnson Controls, Retrotech Systems, these are all large energy service consultant companies that we work with right now that are backing these types of energy efficiency projects with various technologies, HVAC, lighting, alternative energy sources. And so one of the things we need to realize is this is very real, and if the money is there, if the cost of if it can be financed, these people want to implement these things, and so it's available. And so it's not actually, in what we're seeing in the industry, is it's not expensive at all. Actually, what we're doing all around the country is helping businesses improve their bottom line by implementing these technologies with no initial cost, improving their bottom lines and making them more efficient and more competitive. And then a lot of these projects, the right energy efficiency projects, have outstanding ROI. The rate of return is high. And so what we are constantly doing is educating consumers on the differences between energy efficiency projects for the sake of energy efficiency projects and energy efficiency projects that are going to pay businesses back. And then thankfully, we have in Michigan a lot of great programs set up by the utilities and consumers and DTE to help absorb some of this initial cost of investment. If there is a hurdle there, consumers pays $180 to install a light fixture, and they're absorbing these initial costs, so it can help incentivize businesses to take that leap. And universities should be open to doing these same type of initiatives. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that are willing to take on that money because they know that, and when you're willing to back it financially, you have to feel confident in the technology over the life of the performance contract. And so this is all out there.
I can cover the renewable energy piece. One thing that we've been really fortunate at in the industry is prices have come down significantly over the last 5 years. I think the most recent figure I saw for 2012 is solar came down 40% last year. Wind energy has come down roughly 60% over the last 3 or 4 years. So based on economics, with fossil fuel costs going up due to some of the environmental concerns and aging facilities and credit being a challenge, and renewable prices coming down, that helps everybody. One of the things that we have done is start to put together a program similar in approach to Michigan State, but where we can work with companies to develop a roadmap, and we call it Shades of Green, which is meaning that they can jump in at a certain point, or really any point on a spectrum. Go back to my comment that sustainability is about a journey, and really develop a roadmap so that they can understand at a certain point, in terms of pricing or whatever incentives might be available, certain types of renewable energy become affordable, whether it's distributed or they're buying it from another source. So again, I think you're going to see a lot more over the next few years. The Walmart announcement this week is significant, and I think we just have to keep investing in the commercialization. And as we get more systems installed out there, the economics at some point are going to cross over. I did see one general prediction by Boston Consulting Group. They said in the next 5 years, renewable energy as a whole, which of course there are 3 or 4 sources there that you could say are renewable, maybe more, will be on parity with fossil fuels. So we're getting there.
Okay. A couple related questions that I'll ask. Can MSU ask for state or federal support to make a faster transition to renewables? And that's also coupled with what can the state of Michigan do to encourage green energy development?
Well, Trustee Byram is here, and so she's better able to respond to this than I am, but the vehicles that had been envisioned to provide particularly the public sector with access to capital have not materialized. I think it's the most gracious way to say it. And so we need to do that either as a part of our own programmatic efforts by thinking about how the new bioengineering building can be more efficient by design, we've just done it with the Bot nursing building as a priority for design. And then we're going to have to think about ourselves in the same way the private sector thinks about itself. And we have a utility bill, and we have a way of thinking about what we pay forward in order to get the savings that we need to make the transitions that are part of becoming more energy efficient and thinking about other energy sources.
Okay. This question is for Bruce. LEED certification has led to some very positive developments in building construction, but LEED has also come under criticism as a case of the fox guarding the hen house. Can LEED move to a third-party certification process?
And I can talk to maybe two angles to this. One is LEED has been a very popular program. I do have a couple statistics on this. As of last year, June 2012, 2 billion square feet of building space in the U.S. is LEED certified. I can't tell you what percent. Does anybody know how many billion square feet there are in the U.S. office space? But projects over 50 million, 71% now are LEED certified. And as with any program, I'll say it's not perfect, and I got visibility into the program when it first arose or was developed, emerged back in 2001. And at that time, it was, the growth just took off exponentially. And when I say it's not perfect, it wasn't until recently that a building owner would have to continue to submit ongoing performance of how the building is doing from an energy perspective. So there has been those challenges, but I would say what it's done is certifications and standards help on a couple fronts. One is they help the consumer, the building owner, to know what they're getting, right? So when we talk about greener buildings, and I'll say it that way, there's a way at least to understand some metrics there. The second thing is it helps from a financing perspective, going back to that, because again, it's measurable. So it takes some of the confusion out of the market, it accelerates, builds awareness. But the other side of that has not been perfect in terms of certification. I do believe there is a program in the last 2 years, and somebody here might know more than I do about it, there is a third-party verification group. And I can't say what the name of it is, but that was one of the criticisms early on, and so I believe it has been addressed now.
Okay. This question, we're going to turn to Linda in our audience again. What are MSU's plans for new wind and solar technology?
Okay, we're in the midst of installing our meteorological tower out on South Campus at hub height of the large-scale wind generators so we can validate wind energy. Wind energy, it all depends on whether you have the capacity or not to make the business plan. We've done some ground solar mount measurements, and now we're going to erect the tower and get actual measurements at hub height so we can really prove out the business plan. It's a whole nother discussion on, are we going to put large-scale wind out on South Campus farms? There's other environmental impacts. I like to say there's no energy source that has no environmental impact. We need to do wildlife studies for birds, for bats, for endangered species, and what's the impact on those if we were going to go down this path. That's after we make the business case, and we haven't made the business case yet. For solar, the price of solar has come down. That's good news. I agree with you there. It's still kind of marginal in the state of Michigan. We don't, as we've all seen in the last 2 weeks, we've had a lot of gray days. Solar technology's improved, so it still generates on those gray days, but it doesn't generate at night as well. So we're looking at partnering again with a third-party company to look at a business plan that might make sense, that we would get that payback. And then the challenge is, where do you put it? We've got a beautiful campus. We don't want to cut down trees to put a large-scale solar farm. So again, everything has an environmental impact. We're looking at all the possibilities and are studying them all and trying to make the business case as well.
Let me comment, because I just came back from a set of discussions nationally. There are different ways of thinking about alternative, and I'll pick solar as the example. Is it the sole source from the building, which is the Walmart solution? And it's easy to think about that if you have individual buildings and an individual store in a particular location. The interesting sort of component as these new types of solar panels and arrays change, along with sort of vertical wind opportunities, is can they augment and supplement particularly electrical consumption, electrical production, so that you can drop your capacity and how you deal with peak loads, which has some very interesting economic analysis that's not been necessarily a part of the energy discussions to date. And for a place like us that uses cogeneration and has very low cost per building already, how do we think about this differently than simply, do we have a solar farm, do we have a wind farm, those kinds of issues? And also, how do we change the rules that let us more easily access energy developed in those sources through distribution systems? And there are some chokeholds on those that are also important as one thinks about power. So I think the technology has also shifted that nature of the discussion, and the plans need to accommodate those kinds of changes.
Okay. Next question. And forgive me, I'm trying to read handwriting here. The monetary and economic aspects make this a challenging transition. Is MSU willing to take any sacrifices in order to improve the livelihood of local and global communities?
Well, if you think about what we've done to date, and I won't repeat all the statistics, I encourage you to go to the website in terms of the carbon footprint that's already been changed in an environment where we've had a reduction of 15% in the state budget and are looking at inflationary changes. Then to say that there have been no sacrifices made in order to achieve all of those things, including the building changes, I think is an unfair statement. The statement really is, can you make more sacrifices? And that's always one of those debatable questions. And some of it is how much that affects tuition, how much we can do through implementing the kind of energy conservation measures that permit us to accept a 5-year payout and not an 18-month payout, which is the standard in the commercial sector. And we've been prepared to accept longer payouts in order to have more immediate impact. And I think the other question is, how do we create a culture in which, if you're going to be a model nationally or internationally for sustainability, you don't simply revert back to, I need to be paid for good behavior. And so we need to engage the social and behavioral sciences in different kinds of research projects, because most of these ideas lose their immediate traction because of people, not necessarily because of technology. And that's another way in which the university can invest in this effort in ways that not only help us, but think about the impact across the globe.
Okay. President Simon, what is the best way for businesses or organizations to share new ideas or technology with MSU?
Well, I think there are really two ways or three ways of doing that, because we're a very open place. One is that we encourage through Business Connect in the tech transfer operation the opportunity to have a two-way street, because there's both a purchasing opportunity and the vetting of new ideas, as well as oftentimes these new ideas require additional innovation, R&D development around them. And Business Connect is one place that you can begin that process. Second place you can begin that process is by talking with the Sustainability Office, Jennifer, because they're nested within our overall strategic infrastructure planning systems approach, and that is a vehicle that can be used to do that. The third avenue is to interact with the purchasing department, because those are the ways in which we can better understand both criteria as well as approaches to large-scale purchasing of products that have already been tested elsewhere. And I would say finally, either through Jennifer or directly through Ron Flynn or Satish Upta, are a way of thinking about different kinds of partnerships in joint development and acquisition of materials that would put us on the leading edge of new arrangements and new alignments. And those are the four pretty simple ways to go about doing this.
Okay. Question really for all of our panelists. Renewable energy, and in parentheses, wind and solar, are unreliable, so they will need backup facilities, and again in parentheses, fossil. So what mechanisms have evolved to overcome the reliability problem?
I'll speak to one side of that question. I probably can't touch on the whole thing, but it's a big question. I think one of the things that universities and the private sector is for sure starting to look at it as well, but it's the emergence of the DC technology and the DC grid. Emerge Alliance is doing a lot of work with this, but what we're seeing is we're getting an increasing number of commercial customers that are willing to evaluate this technology, and then public sector as well. And what's happening right now is the idea is scalability, okay? So we develop technologies knowing that they're going to continue to develop. And so what we do is we create smart technology that's upgradable and scalable. And so we create grids and infrastructures that can support scalability in emerging technologies. And so one of the things that we're working on right now is a DC microgrid system, where you've got light fixtures in the commercial sector that are DC ballast, and we use what we call power servers or microgrid power servers. Emerson, some of these other companies make them. But what they essentially do is enable you to manage input power, whether it's AC input power in a traditional sense or DC from various renewables like solar and wind. And so what an organization can do is they can install these types of systems, this type of infrastructure, knowing that maybe solar's not what they do tomorrow, but solar is what they do 5 years from now, and a solar grid is something that they could then scale into their existing infrastructure. And so I think that there's a huge growth window coming in the DC side of things. And I think as we implement our infrastructure at our buildings and our universities, we need to be thinking about that, because that gives you the ultimate in scalability.
Yeah, and if I could just add, coming out of the tech industry, I was in information technology for 20 years with a focus on networks. Following up on what Brandon said, a lot of it becomes a software issue, right? How do you integrate these various forms into a microgrid and manage that in a better way? So I think there'll be a software-driven solution. The other part of it is advanced battery storage has come a long ways in the last 24, 36 months, and we've seen some very large-scale battery deployments for wind projects. Solar, it certainly makes sense, back to the intermittency issue. In a state like Michigan, that's a great combination. So those costs are coming down. The technology is getting more affordable. But back to one of the barrier questions I said earlier is how do you get that at a scale that makes sense?
But to use an example of research that has come up in some of the conversations, If you think about wind energy in northern climates and the issue of icing, which is one of the intermittent problems that doesn't exist if you're further south. But on the other hand, if you're further south, you're probably going to be using more solar technology than wind technology. So there's an interesting sort of dynamic of this. So the research question is there a way to design these things differently in a very short-term application that might require the development of new kinds of materials in order to solve that particular problem that then lets those windmills that are wind energy that are part of the grid, where the storage problem is less critical than if you're a small town and want to use this for your own energy source. How do we begin to think through those research issues, and what roles can we play, can others play in trying to find some relatively immediate solutions that can change the efficiency curve, not totally, but significantly, that then drops the cost and makes the world sort of more amenable to this kind of energy. That kind of systems thinking is another way to move, I think, the needle on reliability by not just thinking about the more traditional definitions of reliability.
There have been a couple of questions, and we probably have time for just this last set, a couple of questions that have a lot to do with the aggressiveness of our energy plan, or generally, why has it taken so long for people to really start looking at renewable energy? So the first question, or really, I guess the question I will ask is, can we be more aggressive with MSU's energy plan, or do you think it's feasible? And then why do you think people are only now thinking about renewable energy?
I'll answer real quick on your behalf.
Okay, jump in here.
Just to clarify.
This is sort of one of those questions for which there is no good answer.
Yeah, but I will just say, in having read other plans at different universities, in terms of aggressiveness, Michigan State's certainly leading the way. This is not a passive plan. I think they have good goals in place. It's not wishful thinking, but it is quite aggressive. And, there's opportunity costs, right? You have to weigh these things in terms of what is it going to do to tuition and different type of initiatives. So I will say it's pretty aggressive. I don't think that's a fair way to even ask. It's the wrong question, quite frankly.
Thank you very much. Because it's better for you to say that than for me after you look at all. What I've said to folks is that anyone who's a leader can put a date on something they can't do.
Right.
Okay. And that's a pretty easy thing to happen. And if you look at what's out there, you have plans that have dates on them that have already passed in some cases, for which there have been no progress of the kind that we've had. So my sense about social change and our responsibility goes back to our mission, which is to blend the best of science and the best of the connection of social and behavioral science to the real problems of the world, and find solutions that are both work in the real world, not just in some theoretical component that is nice to do. Because that's where real progress is made, and that's our role historically. And it has a lot of rough edges to it, but the value of the plan, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, is it's adjustable. It isn't that we're going to find a target and then say, gee whiz, we've just quit. Thank you very much. These are intermediate steps towards a long-term goal of using all renewable energy. That's what the plan says. And we're going to grow as fast as we can, but at the same time do it in a practical way so that it works not just for this generation, but it's sustainable as a plan for the long term. Which is why it's sort of neat to say a shiny, we can say we're burning biomass in a boiler, and gee whiz, we're looking at wind, and gee whiz, we're doing all of this. Those are nice, shiny things. They don't make an integrated, sustainable, purposeful plan that's going to change the planet. And that's what we're about. That's our goal. That was our creation. That's why we were built as a great research university, and that's what we're going to do. And you'll have to look at the numbers over a period of time and see whether we're doing it or not. And you can look at the other plans as these guys have and make your own adjustments. So there's a difference between a group always on campus, which the great thing about campuses is there are people who always push you. That's the greatest thing about a campus. Okay? And the transparency of the plan and the commitment is something that can be benchmarked against others, and I'll let it stand, as you've said, against others. At the same time, we're just going to work at this, and if we're falling short, we'll tell you why, and we'll try to figure out how to fix it.
The other part of that question was about renewable energy, and why do you think that communities are now looking at renewable energy versus in the past? So you'd mentioned, Bruce, that businesses were
It's not scalable.
Focusing on renewable energy
I think
now.
it's been building momentum. I think you really have to look at it in perspective over the last 30 years. From what I've seen the last couple of years, wind was the single largest source of new generation in the U.S. So we kind of crossed over that point. That's pretty significant if you really think about it. Wind power, well, I'm not going to quote any more statistics because I'll be wrong, but if you look at 30 years, go research how much the price has come down. I mean, it's incredible. So I had a chance to live in Europe about 12 years ago, which is where I really first got introduced to renewable energy. And just seeing, it's taken us about 10 years to kind of get to where Europe was 10 years ago. But if you look ahead, you know, we're marching towards, as I said, it's a journey. And so I really look at it and I'm pretty optimistic and think we've made incredible progress. And it is getting to a point where it is getting more scalable, it's more reliable, and it makes sense. But you really have to take it in context of each individual situation of how you can get it financed, as I said, where, you know, what the return metrics are and all of those things. But I'm actually pretty optimistic as I sit here today.
Well, I'd like to thank our panelists again for their time today and all of those who've joined us either live or online. This will be recorded and available at energytransition.msu.edu. We received a lot of questions, and we will be answering all of the questions, and they will be posted on the website. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for attending.
Thank you. Sorry, I caught my train. I told Jennifer to start because I knew I could make by the time she did the introduction, we